Hello everyone, welcome to the second part of the medieval wall tutorial. We're going to be going over base color on this one. So I just wanted to show you guys kind of like what are some of the things we're going to be focusing on. So it's pretty simple. Base color. We do have just like a plain uniform color for our stone. And then we do have some sort of noise here to kind of break it up so it doesn't look so flat. And then we have like our damage on our stone. Our outlines and our cracks, and then we have like these spots here just to kind of add some more stylization. And then of course we have our stained glass here, and we do create two ways. We have two ways for the emissive. We can either have the emissive look be on the color itself. So like if you don't want to use actual emissive in your shader, you could have the emissive look be on the base color. That's one way, or we could also have the emissive mask itself. So two ways to do that, and that's pretty much it for base color. It's not too hard. I think the most complicated stuff is like trying to get like this like instead of having just like straight black lines, we kind of break it up. Um, so yeah, let's get right into it. So before I start hiding the nodes, I just want to show you guys what I meant about having the emissive look beyond the base color versus having an emissive mask. So if we look over here at the 2D view, you can see that I've disabled this blend mode here, but if I turn it on, you can see that the texture, the base color, looks like it's got the light source in there. And if you don't want that, you can disable it so the base color looks like this, and then the emissive look comes from the emissive map here. Because if you look at the 3D, it still looks like it's on, and if you turn on that blend that we just turned off, so that it shows up on the texture on the base color version, they kind of amplify each other. But I mean, you can have total control. So if we go here and we turn off the emission intensity here under the materials default, if we turn this off, now the emissive isn't working, but it still looks like it's on because we have that mask, that emissive mask on the base color itself. So, depending on what you need, you might want that or you might not want that, but we're going to go over that when we get to this part of the graph. All right, so I'm going to pause here and I'm going to hide all the nodes, all the blend nodes, and then we're going to go through this quickly. Okay, so this is where we left off. I've disabled the roughness and I've disconnected or turned off all the blend nodes for the base color portion up here. So this is where we left off, so let's pick up where we left off. So to start, first we're going to start with our bricks, and I've unplugged it here, but I'm just going to plug this in. And we're using a gradient map, and we're just pulling from our first node, the tile sampler. And then I'm just going to click on these so you guys can see the values. When I follow along other tutorials and they use the gradient maps or the gradient node, I use the color picker here, and I'll go on my screen with the tutorial on it, and I'll try and like aim. It's not always perfect, but you can either aim for this little like circle with the color, or you can just try and click right above it in the gradient, and you'll get a pretty close color. But I like to show you guys everything, so I'll click on these for you guys so you can see their position here and their colors. So this one is set to this, and then this one just a little bit brighter than this one. That way our bricks have two colors basically, like a light and a dark, and then using this map, it'll pick a random color between those two, and it'll give us some variance so that not all the bricks are the same color. Then we bring this back. Now for this one, what we're doing here is we are coloring the in-between of the bricks. So before we had this, where the extend, because of our map before, the extend goes all the way up to it touches the next brick. But obviously we have a gap in between the bricks, so I just wanted to make sure that that color, or like where the grat would be the same color. So we have an invert here, and basically after the edge detect from our tile sampler, because our edge detect has black for the in between, so I invert it to make that white, and then I plug that into the opacity, copy, and then we have a uniform color here. I'm gonna make these 16 by 16. And then yeah, so this is the color that I want the background to be. So that's pretty simple. Then moving on, we have our larger bricks, and that's these guys, the ones that are kind of like framing the smaller bricks. Now I wanted these to be different color, or like a darker color, so that there's some contrast between the bricks, the small bricks and the big ones. So for this one, we're pulling from our mask. So if we go down here, just after the part where we subtract these lines. So pull from that into the opacity, set the copy, and then our uniform color here. And then this is for the lower base. Same thing, I'm using the same one because they're all going to share. Because I wanted to have like a two-tone for our wall here. So for this one, we're just pulling from after the bevel. And actually, I should be scanning this because of the bevel. There's a gradient here, and we don't want that. So I'm just gonna fix that. And just to keep it neatly, I'm just gonna move everything in one set. Okay, and then don't forget to turn this up all the way up. A second. Okay, let's do this instead. Do 0.5 and 1. Alright. Then we do our upper base color, so that's like the top bar. You can see here it covers up those lines there. These guys up here. And I think the reason why this is happening is because, yeah, because it's tiling, and then when I scan it, it's giving me everything. Okay, so for this one, we're pulling from the top bar here. So again, after the bevel, I guess I should probably scan this one as well. So actually, I should be pulling from this guy instead. Yeah, because the bevel doesn't increase the extent of my mask, because I'm using negative values, so it's always gonna bevel inward. If I was using a positive value, it would bevel outward. So instead of having to use a scan, I can just I'm just gonna follow this right here, just go from here like that. We're just gonna move one of these back. And we'll do the same thing here because we can just use this guy here. So I'm pulling from the transform before the bevel. That way we can avoid having to use a scan. Just less nodes, the better. All right. um, Now we're doing these guys up here, the upper cubes. So for this, what I wanted to do was kind of give them different shades as well, different shades of gray. So after the histogram scan, because here they're isolated, I'm going to create a flood fill and then a flood fill to random grayscale into the same gradient map. I think this is the same gradient map, but I'll just show you again. This should be a 0. This should be a 1. B4, B4, B4. And then we drive that into the foreground. These are all set to copy, by the way. And then for our opacity, yeah, see here I was smart and I did it before the bevel, but yeah, before the bevel. Oh, and then here I subtract this bar from the longer rectangles to just to get these guys and not get this bar on it. So the bar from upper base here, I created a connection and I subtracted from this mask just to get these guys up here. And then we have the columns color. So it's these guys. Similar process as before. Before the bevel. On the columns portion here. It splits into two. Into this guy will go into the opacity because this is the extent of the columns. So that goes into the opacity. And then we have a scan here, again, just to make sure that we're not getting any gradients or anything. Again, flood fill. Now it's important here that you make sure that your flood fill to random grayscale, that the colors match. Otherwise, you're going to have a column when it tiles where half of it is made up of a different stone than the other. So unless you want that, you want to make sure that they're the same. That way you're making sure that the color tiles from one side to the other, because it's technically the same column, right? So if you were to go here, 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 and change the tiling to 2, it's the same column. So you want to make sure that matches. So then I'm doing auto levels to get the full range of grayscale. Again, same gradient map, I think. You can see the settings there. You accidentally move things. Why is it not letting me delete? There we go. Yeah, okay. Into a copy. So now we have some variation on the stones for the column. Since they're beveled, so it's almost like each piece is its own bit. So I wanted them to be different. Then we move on to our column stands color, and that's what the columns are standing on. Pretty simple here. We're just gonna pull from, yeah, this should be from before the bevel. That, just to make sure that there's no gradients or grayscales. Just move that back one. Pretty simple here, and we're using the same uniform color as the darker tone. So we have our light tone here, and then we have our dark tone. Alright, so now for the window backwall color. So technically this is aiming for this guy here, but since we're painting in layers, it's just gonna paint everything. So for this one, hopefully I went before the bevel again, not after, but probably not. Yep. So grab this, swap that out. Pretty standard, just a copy, and we're using that same darker color. I don't know why I have this here. Now we have the lower piece. So this is this guy down here, kind of like the windowsill there. I did that thing again. We'll pull from this guy. I think he should be in the middle. Oh, the top. Wait, let me check this out. Alright. We're actually going to scan this one. It's probably not even, we probably don't even need to, but knowing that there's a gradient because of the bevel kind of bothers me. So what I did here was, since it was coming from this guy, and this guy's after the bevel, you can see that there's like a bit of a gradient here from the bevel. So I pull from that guy into a scan, position all the way up to 1. And then that's going into the middle, into the background here of this blend mode. And then if I hide this bar here actually extends to the bottom, and we already colored that. So what I had to do was take the lower bar that I don't want it on and subtract it from this bar to get this, which is the actual shape of that section there. And then we're subtracting that bar, and that bar is coming from, let's highlight it. It's coming from the transform here. Again, before the bevel. Alright, we're right here. So then for this one, we're using, I'm just gonna round. So that gives us kind of like a neutral color for the stone, because we're using gradients here. Alright, so now we're going to our arch split color, so that's like that piece in the center. That guy. I'll have to look at this part here. But anyways, for this part, we are pulling from this transform 2D, and that's going into the background. And then we need to subtract, okay, so I already see how we can fix it. Yeah, I shouldn't be subtracting with the bevel. Sorry about that. So let's see, where's that coming from? It should be coming from, I don't know, why did I do this? It should be coming from here. So, hold on, let me follow that again. Okay, so it should be like this. Okay, so from the original mask, I'm seeing lines because I'm been staring at bevels for so long. I'm seeing lines that aren't there. Okay, so yeah, so we want from this guy. That way we don't have those lines that were there before. So if we go back over here and I undo that, I was using the wrong mask, so we're getting these guys. So I want to use the solid one, and now it's clean. So that correction we just made goes on the top here. That's this guy. And then we're subtracting that from this guy. Now, don't worry about this because it gets masked later. Or, painted over. Actually, it's right here, but it's not noticeable because it's under this. Or it's the same color. And it'll be covered with like ambient occlusion and stuff. Also, it's tiny. Okay, so that gives us the mask for that, for this middle piece here. And then we're using the same color that we just created, the uniform. Now we have this little guy. Now this is optional if you want this. I think I had it turned off for my renders and stuff for the final. But if you want to have this be a different color, you would use this mask here. And you just plug that into your opacity and then whatever color you'd want it. If you want to have like some more contrast, but I kept it this way. Or if you want to use this color instead. Okay, now for the, what's this? The window glass color. So we have two approaches here. We can do we can do a solid color if that's what you need, or we can do stained glass. So I have this other uniform color hanging out up here. If I plug that into the top there, this is what I originally had, and then I realized it was too boring. But yeah, you could do a uniform color to just have it be that, and the emissive will still work. And I'll show you guys at the end, but we're gonna go with the stained glass. All right, so how do we do the stained glass? Pretty simply, really. Just start with a cells 4, and that already kind of does half the job for you. Now, I wanted my glass and my emissive color to be the same. Unless you were doing something like what I did in my my ArtStation post on my thumbnail. Let me just pull that up. So if we look here, I have the glass purple and the light kind of like a candlelight color. So it's, you know, orange. And I think it created like this nice contrast. So unless you want something like that where like it's a candle, so it's going to be the same color, and then your glass be a different color, you know, we'll do that. But I wanted the glass and the light to be the same color. So I created a exposed parameter so that when I change that color, it changes both the glass and the light source. That way I don't have to keep trying to match up two values. But if you're trying to do something where like the light is one set color and the glass is another, then you know we can do that too. Like if we look here, the glass and the color, the emissive color are the same. And I guess that's if like the glass is like super thick or not very transparent, then you would not see the color on the other side. Then it would just look like it's the same. But yeah. Okay, so let's go back here and let's set this up. So you can create a uniform color and then click on this guy here and then hit exposed as new graph input and then name it like, I don't know, glass color, glass slash light color, or you can do two separate ones if you want to have two different exposed parameters. So if we go here and we go to my preview, you can see that I have emissive color, and if I change this, it's going to change my glass, and it also changes my emissive. Let me just plug that back in here. Right, so they match. So you could have two of these where one's like glass color and the other one's like emissive color. So I'm going to turn this back off for now. So like I said, I made it an exposed parameter so that I don't have to keep finding this. I can just double click out here and then it'll bring up this input parameters window. So once you do that, once you expose it, it'll become blue like this. And if you want to change it, you have to double click out here and then go into the preview and change it here. So once you pick a color, we're going to do an HSL. And I made this one darker. Well, I made it darker just in general for the glass because I didn't want the glass to be super bright. So this one's a brighter version even though we went darker. And then this one's a darker version. Oh no, I'm sorry, wait. Oh yeah. Okay, so even though the values here are higher than this one is darker because it's borrowing from this guy. So it's like normal color, dark, darker. If this was pulling from this guy, then this would be brighter just because, yeah, the lightness here is not as low. But because it's making it darker, but it's coming from this guy, then it's going to be darker. Okay, anyways, so the first one here is plugging into the foreground, and this one is plugging into the background. And then our cells 4 connects into the opacity so that similar to like our gradient, but I couldn't get the gradient to become an exposed parameter, so I had to use a uniform color and do it this way. So it's saying that the black ones are going to be, these dark ones, and then the brighter ones are going to be this guy. And then we get this. And now here I do an HSL just to kind of brighten it up a bit. And then this goes into a blend at the copy with a just black uniform color on top. Now this is to add the lines. So now we're going to look at that section here. So after your cells 4, we're going to do an edge detect. And then we're going to invert the edge detect so that we're working with the in-between. Now here it's going to split into a slope blur. This is to kind of, if you don't want like this like noisiness stuff, you can just hide it. And if you want something more like this, if you just want straight lines, but to keep in line with the black stylized outline, or this like broken up black lines, we did a slope blur, samples all the way up, intensity to 0.05, and we're using min because I want the breakup to go inside of the stuff, not outside. Otherwise it would give us this, unless you want that. So I went with min, so you can cut away, not cut out. And we'll use the clouds 1 for this. Standard clouds 1, I just changed the seed. After the slope blur, I used a scan to tighten it up, the fall off. I didn't want too much fall off, unless you do. And then I used the transform 2D here. And I think I rotated this guy so that we can use a slope blur again, but it's a different clouds by just rotating it because of the orientation. Again, we basically do the same thing again. And then we do same settings, except we're using an intensity of 0.02. And then again, we tighten it back up a bit with a scan. Now back over here, after our invert grayscale from our edge detect, we use a bevel to create a gradient. So before it was like it's solid. So we use a bevel to create a gradient in our lines. And then I use a levels here to play around with the values. And then once we have, this guy and this guy, we do a max lighten. And the reason why I do a max lighten here, or between these two, is so if I hide, if I flip these, and then I hide this, we'd be using this mask. But I still, in some areas, there's nothing there. So I used this like weaker, thinner fall off version to still have something in between. So even though we deleted some of the space, I still want something there, even if it's faint. Otherwise we'd have, oops, not that. We would have this, where there'd be some spots where it's completely nothing there. So by, having these two, you still kind of have like a faint line where it's weaker, holding the shape down. Okay, so then after that will go into the opacity here, and it'll give us this. And then that goes into the top. Now we need an opacity to tell it where this stuff is going to go. So for this, we're going down to, if you had the distance node, it's just the one before it. If you don't, then it's the one after the scan and the invert. So from this blend here, this is where we multiplied out the background. So pull from that, that goes into the opacity, and now we've masked out where we need our glass, our stained glass. Okay, now we're going to do the window frame so it doesn't look so weird. Let me actually disconnect my metallic because we're not at that part of the tutorial yet. That's why it's looking a little weird. And where do we leave off? Right here. Okay. So yeah, so the frame colors. Okay. So for now, for this part, I'm trying to remember why I did it this way, but let's start with this guy and let's follow our stuff. So again, I don't want it from the bevel, so this should be, where's this guy going? This guy's going into the middle, I assume? Yeah. So pull from this guy. Have this guy go into the middle. Now I think this setup here is if I decide to use this distance node. Yeah, I think that's why that setup is there. And like I said in the previous episode, in the height portion, I wanted it to look like this. If I have this distance node on, the frame kind of blends directly into the stone. And if I have it off, you can see that there's like a gap, like a crease in between, which I didn't want, but then I kind of liked it, so I disabled it, but I left it here just in case you wanted that. And the reason for that setup I just mentioned is because I have to account for that change, but because I haven't disabled, this isn't really doing anything, but I'll show you guys just in case you do want that distance node on. So what we had to do was okay, so we took this guy from before the bevel, and we subtract this guy from that. So if we follow this guy, so we take this guy and we subtract that from this guy. And again, this only matters if you're using the distance node. And then we take the result of that and we subtract the bar from underneath. So if we follow this guy from this guy, and I should probably be doing this using this guy, or you know what? It's fine. We'll use a scan. So let's follow it again. Now the bevel is so subtle that you probably don't need to, but since we're working with masks, I want to keep it. I want to keep it, to a black and white mask. I don't want to have any bevels or gradients. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, but I don't think many of you are going to be using the distance portion, but just in case. Okay, so then that goes into a copy. We have this uniform color here at 0.25, and then that gives us our frame. So then we have like a frame color here. So if you want to change the metal color, you can do so here. And then we have the inner frames. And for this guy, we're going to pull from this blend. And then we need to do a scan because this blend has been leveled out to the position in the height, and we need it to be white. So I just use a scan, set the position all the way up, feed that into the opacity, and then use the same color so that our frames are the same color. Now we start adding the emissive. Now this is the emissive portion. So how do I explain this? Okay. So what we need here is to create the mask for the emissive. And what that means is that it needs to be bound to just the window portion. So we need the frames out. We need everything else out because the stone is not going to be emissive. We need to mask out these lines. I didn't have that originally and I didn't like the way it looked. So let me show you. I think it's this guy. So if I disable this guy, the emissive look is not accounting for the lines and it kind of just looks flat. So let me plug in the emissive back. Yeah, so this looked like just flat to me. So I was like, okay, we got to bring the lines back in and it looks so much better. Okay, so yeah, so we have to create this mask. So we need the lines out there. We need to have a gradient so that the light looks like it's fading. And yeah, that's it. So to make that, first we need to isolate the what's glass. So we start with this mask, and if we follow it, it takes us to before the distance. So right here. And then I invert that mask. And then I add the frames. So let's follow that. I'm not sure if this is in the height. I guess it should be, but if it's not, we'll go over it real quick. I don't remember if I covered that part in the height. Okay, so what we did here is I took these frames from this blend, the two levels, and then I took these frames, so the outer frames before the levels, again, because these are adjusted for the height. So we take those, that, and that, so we take these two, and then we add them together, but because this guy still is using its old height, I scan all the way up 1, 1 to make them just white, and then I take this to go up here into the foreground, and then I add it with this, and it gives us this. Now if I had to label this guy. Okay. Now, because we do have a boolean for having a window or no window, I need to have that switch here. That way, if there is no window, it just does this flat color. So create a switch grayscale here and then change it to your window boolean. I think we did create that in the height. Then after we have this mask, we're going to invert it again. So now we have this. So now this is what we needed, where it's just where the glass is. It's not where the frames are. It's not where the stone is or the window frames. Just the glass. Now that we have this, we need to add our black lines. So let's go back to this. This is before, this is where we added it to, yeah, to our stained glass. So we're going to take this, and then that's going to feed into the foreground, and then we're going to subtract, because we're subtracting white lines. And it's going to give us this. Now that we have this, we're going to go into a multiply blend mode here, And we're going to start with a gradient linear 1. And then I use the levels here to get the gradient where I want it. So, like I said, I use the levels to get the gradient up here, so it starts to fade at the top of the window. Otherwise, if I don't have this, then it just looks like this, because it's using the entire thing. So I wanted to match that. And then you could even, I thought about it, but I thought it was too much work, not worth the squeeze. But you can use a 2D transform here to move this brightest portion to sit here. But I accounted for that in here, so it's not that big a deal. So once we have that, now our light, if we look here, our light is working from the bottom to the top, and that's great and all, but I wanted to have the light kind of like be focused around this portion. So I was imagining like a candle or a light source here. So then you would have some sort of like this kind of shape. But right now the shape is this, where it just goes from top to bottom. So you can see here that with this, I darken the sides a bit, so it kind of looks more like a flame shape rather than just kind of like from the top to bottom. So I did want to have some fall off on the sides. So I created a gradient linear 2. I played around with the levels, and then I multiplied that on top again, same as here. So then we have this fall off. So we go from just completely emissive to from the bottom to the top to getting rid of some of it from the sides. And you can probably spend more time on this and use like a round shape or a capsule or an oval to try and get a better shape. But I thought this looked pretty good. So once we have this, I use a levels node, and then I do a auto levels. To bring the shape back. And then that feeds into the opacity of this guy. And we are going to create another uniform color. But once you create it, make sure you change you click this and then you hit emissive color. That way this uniform color is using the same thing this uniform color is doing. So if you change this one, it'll change to that one. Now this is where you could have this one be a different one if you want to have the light source be a different color than the glass. This is where you would do that. That way you could do like, let's say purple here, and if you were to plug this in here, then you could have your light be one color and your glass another. But I wanted them to match, so I'm using the same exposed parameter. So then that goes into the foreground, and then this black one goes into the background. So then you have this. Now this goes into the a different switch color. Now this is a different exposed parameter, and this one's called window emissive. So if it's true, it's going to use this, and if it's false, it's not going to have anything. That way, if I double click out here, I have a window emissive boolean. So if I turn this off, it's turning off the emissive, but we still have a window. So we have a window, no window, and then if we do have a window, we want to have the window be on or off. So you don't have to always have the light on. And then that plugs into your emissive output. If you don't have an emissive output, create an output node. I call it emissive, and then your label, which is what's seen. So I capitalized the label. So you have emissive and emissive, and then you want to add an item here, and then change it to usage to emissive. So then just go here, and then look for emissive, and then that's it. And then you can plug it in. Once you plug it in, right-click your output node, and then click on View Output in 2D View and 3D View. And then it's going to ask you to choose a channel, and then just choose emissive. And then that should be working for you. Okay. So I have a uniform color here because if I want to turn off my emissive, I can just tell it to be black. But right now the emissive is also on the base color. So we'll do that next. Plug that back over here. Okay, so that covers the emissive channel. So now we're going to use that same mask that we created and plug that into the opacity of this blend. Now this is if you want the emissive look to be on the base color instead of the emissive, or both. So we're going to continue where we left off here with the inner frame color, the window. And then this color is going to go into the foreground. So that you can see here that the emissive look is on it. But I turn it off just because I don't want it to be on my base color. But that is going to feed into a switch color again, the window emissive one. And this portion is going to go into the true. And then before this happens, we're going to split, and then that's going to go into the false. And then this is if this happened to be on, then it turns off with this as well. So you can see it here. Because if you don't have this, then it's going to be always be on unless you hide the node. That's why I have these two stacked together. After this is going to feed into the true, and then this false is coming from this guy, because this is the last thing we did before we started adding window stuff. So if I turn the Boolean window off, then it's pulling this guy. So if you want to have like a Boolean for no window or window, that's where that is. So it's pulling from all the way over there. Now from everything on, from this point on, it's going to be like global stuff. So it's going to be adding the noise on top of everything. So this is just wall stuff, window stuff, and then stuff that would go on both of them. That's why I have my Boolean end here. Alright, so let's bring our window back. And I'm going to turn this off because I don't want the emissive to be on the base color. I have a mask for that. And let's continue. So now this is where we add the surface noise color. So this is just to kind of add some breakup. Because if you look here, it just looks flat. So by adding this, we kind of just add some texture to our color. So we start with a white noise fast into a scan, because I don't want so many. If you want more, then you can turn this up. Then I blur them a little bit to get this effect. Then I use an auto levels. I click the auto levels button. So just hit that and it'll give you this. Unless you didn't use the same settings. And then that's going to feed into a gradient map. And I think this is the same one as before. So I'll show you the colors there. And then that's going to go into the foreground. And then we need an opacity. So we're just going to follow this guy. And this is just going to come from the window because we want to exclude the window. We don't want the stuff on the window. So it's going to be on everything except for the glass. Because if we unplug that, then it's going to put that stuff on the glass as well. So unless you want that, which I didn't, we need that there. Now here I have and turned off HSL, and like if you want to change the color of your brick, if you want to give it like a blue tint or a hue, this is what you would do it. Now it's very subtle. The problem is that it's going to change your glass as well. So I'm gonna disable it because I don't want a hue. So this gives like the stone like a red tint and stuff. You would have to do this actually here, I believe. Yeah, because this is where the yeah, actually, yeah, let's move that. So if you wanted this, I didn't want one, but let's just do this right for you guys. So yeah, this should go, where did I say? If right here. So I'm just gonna do that, do that, disconnect that. I'm just gonna grab all this. And I'm just gonna move it two blend modes over, or two sets over, so that it has room to breathe. Okay, so now if we change this, it won't affect our glass. And my saturation is set to really low, so it's not very noticeable, but if you like change, if we move this up, you can see that it just kind of turned like into more reddish. So if you want to have like more like a bluish stone or whatever, now this won't affect your glass. Alright, but I don't want to use that, so I'm going to disable that. We're going to continue on. We're almost done. Now we can grab all of this. Just fill that gap that we left behind. Okay. So for this next part, this is our highlight color. So for this part, I wanted to add some damage, and you can kind of see it here. And the way I did that was just very simple damage. I just added a polygon 2. I added 3 of them. This one has 3 sides, this one has 4 sides, and this one has 8 sides. So I kind of wanted like a triangle, a square, and a circle. And then I messed around with the curve to kind of give it like this curvy inward look. Then I plugged that into a tile generator, 6 by 6, changed my pattern to image input, 3 inputs. I messed around with, I lowered the scale, I gave it some bit of a scale random, so they're not all the same size, some offset random, rotation random. I don't know why I gave it a global offset, but I did. And then a bit of a luminance random, so that some of the damage is deeper than others, and then I deleted about a quarter of them by my random mask. Then that went into a slope blur to kind of make it look like damage, otherwise it's just going to look like the shapes. See if I would turn this off. It would look like the shapes. So I used a slope blur to kind of deform it a bit, and I used the clouds 2 for that. Max, because I wanted the damage to extend outward, not inward this time, so 0.5 on the intensity. And then I wanted to get rid of the damage from the glass, obviously. So I took this mask. Now I could have pulled from this guy, I believe, but I decided to put from the scan here, which is fine. So that is going to go into here, and I'm going to invert it. I guess I could have just subtracted as well and not have to use this, but I did a multiply, so I had to invert it. So then it gets rid of any stuff that's in that area. So you can see it's gone. Now here, now the damage here goes through a normal set to 10. Make sure you have your normal format set to the right thing. And then I took a normal of so after all our height, so this is the end of our height, I plug that end of our height into a normal, so then we have 2 normals, so we have the damage, because the damage is not part of the height. It's just going to be on the normal. So then we use a normal blend to blend the two together. And then I use a histogram scan. Actually, did I need this here? Actually, we should just do this actually. And then get rid of this. So the blend here, plug that into the mask to get this. And then opacity of the normal blend set to 1. And you need a mask for it to show up, otherwise it looks You can't see it. I don't really understand it too well, but plug that into the opacity, and then you can blend these two together. And then if you want to make one more intense than the other, just you know, turn up the normal that you need to change. Okay, so then we have this blend where we now have the height or the normal information from the height, and then we have the normal information from the damage. So then that's going to feed into a curvature smooth, just like we've done in most of our other tutorials, into a default gradient map, and then that's going to feed on to the foreground, overlay, 0.5. So then we get a bit of a highlight here, so that it helps create some depth. Then we take that normal blend into a curvature Sobel or Sobel, and then we do a scan so that I can get the hard edges. So I'm using 0.4. You can play around with that, and then contrast all the way up. You don't want anything like this, all the way up. Actually, let me turn this back on. So now this is going to be the damage and edge color. So all the black outlines basically. So we do a scan. Like I said, if you lower the contrast, you're gonna get like blurriness. So I wanted my lines to be tight. It's gonna split from the scan again into a slow blur. This is similar to the process to what we did with the stained glass, the black outlines. So we're gonna do a slow blur with the clouds 1, min 0.05 on the intensity, into a scan to tighten it up. Again, clouds, we rotate it. And I can probably change the seed so it's not the same seed as the stained glass. Into another slow blur, again min, lower intensity, and then I scan, and then I take these lines and I bevel it, and then I use the levels to play around with it. The level in mid to 0.475, and then I max lighten together because I still want the line underneath, but that one's going to be way weaker on the spots where the where these are just have disappeared, just to kind of have like a backup line. Otherwise, it looks like this. Once we have that, this feeds into a subtract of 0.75, and just to kind of break it up, if we don't have this, then it looks like that, where the lines are pretty heavy on everywhere. So I created this mask here to erase some of them, to kind of have a more of that look, because it's supposed to be uneven. It's supposed to be missing in some spots or weaker in some spots than others. But it's not completely gone. I still have a little bit of it there. So to do that is I started with a Perlin noise, and then I scanned it to tighten it up like that. Another Perlin noise, and I changed the seeds as I went down. So this was 2, 3, 4. And then I move it around and I increase the tiling, and I just kind of moved it to mess up the, I guess not mess up, but like to mix it up. I moved it. Same thing here. I increased the tiling, that I moved it to the bottom just to kind of break it up more so it's not the same Perlin all over. I use scans for both of these, and then I screen them together to get this. And then here I screen them again to get this. And then I increase the tiling. So I multiply by 2, or sorry, divide by 2. And then subtract. Yeah, if you want black lines everywhere, then you don't do this step. But if you want to kind of break it up like I did, you would need that there. Then one last step, we have a white noise fast here, into a scan, into a blur. Same thing like we did with the surface noise, into an auto levels, and then we subtract just to kind of get rid of some more of those lines. But the lines are not so heavy. So then like if you look over here, like for example this guy here, is because of this. And then we do a subtract. And then this feeds into the opacity. And then we just do a solid black uniform color here. And then if you want to do different color lines, this is where you would do that. So, you know, whatever you need. Just gonna turn that down, and we're not doing white lines. We're doing black lines. Okay. What's this? Cracks. Okay, so now for the cracks. Now we've done cracks before. Nothing too crazy here. I'm gonna turn those back on. You can see them there. Pretty similar process to the stained glass, except we warp the lines to kind of make it look more like cracks. Cells 4, edge detect, invert, directional warp, Gaussian noise, bevel, max lighten. Same process here. We take the warped lines, slow blur, another clouds. Probably should do the next one. Into a scan, into a rotated 90 degrees clouds, into another slow blur, into a scan to tighten it up again. And then we mix that bevel with that slow blur scan to get this. Again, reinforcing the lines by having like a more faint version behind it. Now we do need a vector warp grayscale so that our cracks don't go from one brick to the other like so. We want to make sure that they don't do that. Okay, here it just happened to look like they did, so I'm just actually gonna change this to 11. There we go. And then we're pulling from this flood fill that we created just for that purpose. So I put it down here to kind of stay clear of everything. We're going to do a flood fill from our edge detect here into a flood fill random grayscale. I probably could just use this, honestly. Yeah, you could just use this instead, but random grayscale, auto levels to make sure we're getting the full range, even though I don't. It's a very subtle difference, but it's not that big a deal. And then we have a flood fill to random color. You could distance this if you wanted, or not. I'm just gonna leave it like this because I'm not worried about the in between here. So then that is going to go all the way out, and that's going to go into the vector map here to break up the cracks into a multiply. Now I had to create this mask because I don't want the cracks to be on this stuff, obviously. Yeah, I didn't want it to look like this. So we gotta make sure we mask out where we don't want the cracks. So right now the cracks are on everything. So then we need to create a mask for that. So once we have our auto levels from our random grayscale, we're going to create a blend here to subtract, and we just have to go through this entire line and subtract what we don't want from the cracks. So the first thing is the big bricks mask. So that's coming from the tile sampler. I'm just going to go through this quickly. So these are all just subtract, 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 because we're just trying to get the bricks that we need. Here we do it again. We're subtracting the lower bar mask. Again, it should probably be from here instead, so I'm just going to pull from this guy. So now we're getting rid of that. And if I undo that, it's probably faint, but the bevel would be there, which we don't want. Then we continue down the line. Now we need to subtract the window from it. So we're going to use this mask, which covers the entire thing. And again, it should probably be here, but I'm a noob. So I'm just going to do this. Like that. So then that subtracts the window from it. So now that the window is gone here, Now this is a good place to add. I should have named this. A good place to add our window boolean again, or exposed parameter. So if the window is there, which is this guy, right? Because we're deleting the window, that goes into true. Now if there is no window, then that's this guy. So then we split that into the false. That way it knows that if we disable window, then the cracks are there because of this guy. And if we remove the window, or bring the window back, sorry, now the cracks aren't there because we masked it out. So we're going to continue. I think that's it. And then that plugs into this histogram scan. And then this is to determine how many bricks I want it on. So if I go all the way up, then it's going to put a crack on all the bricks mostly. Obviously I didn't want that, I wanted some of them. So we use the position of 0.37 and our contrast all the way up. And then we do a multiply to mask it, to apply our mask. And then here I subtract. Okay, same thing we did here, where I took a white noise fast and then I subtracted. I guess I could have just. Oh, that is what I did. Yeah, so pull from this auto level from the white noise fast, and then split up here into the foreground, and then subtract. That way we subtract some of those white noise. And then plug that into the opacity, and then we're using the same black uniform color over here. So now that's how we do our cracks. Next is the last thing here. We have some spots. It's to kind of, again, make it more stylized, more abstract. We have these guys. And to do that, I started with a shape disk, set the scale to 0.75. I squished it a little bit with the transform 2D into a scan to make sure we have no fall off. And then I did want some fall off, so I blurred it again to create a bit of a bevel or a small blur. And then I used the transform 2D here to kind of squish it and stretch it. So then I made several versions. And then this one I moved it to the side. This one I squished it down, moved it off a little bit. And then I moved it to the left. So then this one went to the right, this one went to the left. And then I added them together to create these two guys. So then I have three shapes. I have this guy, and this guy. So then I created a tile generator with 3 inputs, 8 by 8, pattern input 3. This one went into the blur one went to the top. This one went into the second input, and then this one with 2 of them went into the third. I played around with the scale random, the offset random, just to kind of throw them around. Global offset again. Probably don't need to change this at all. Rotation random, and I masked out a few of them. That goes into this warp to kind of warp so that way they're not all the same, like perfectly oval shaped. I warped it a bit with a Gaussian noise. And then I slow blurred them again to kind of fall in line with the style of the black lines and cracks. Min 0.0175. We scanned it again to tighten it up. And then I subtract that same dirt noise or white noise fast. So from here, we can continue on and subtract it here. And then here, we need to subtract our window again because I don't want these spots on my window. So we took this mask that we created down here. And then, okay, so from this guy, I inverted and then I multiplied this mask, which is coming from, okay, before the distance. To get this. And I think we'll use this for the metallic. Actually, no, we use it for that last bit there. So from this, and I think we've made this mask before up here somewhere. So I could have probably just recycled it. Yeah, this guy. I could probably just recycled this guy. But, you know, when you're working, sometimes you forget. So I created that guy, which is the same as that guy. And then that's going to go all the way into our foreground. So then we're subtracting the glass from our spots. But if you want the spots on the glass, you could turn this off and you can get spots on your glass. Now the only issue is that I didn't have like a directional warp grayscale to break up these spots. So these spots do carry from the window um to the glass. Now I didn't think it was a big deal to have it because it was like stylized, but you would have to create a different mask if you wanted to break those up. But here I did just because I didn't want it. I didn't want the spots on the glass like that. Thought it would ruin the emissive. That goes into the opacity, and then we reuse the same black again for the spots. That same uniform black from before. And again, we're just using copy most of the time. And then we throw in a sharpen because it's a snow paving tutorial. And then that gives us our base color. And like I said, if you want to have the emissive look be built into the emissive color, then enable this guy here. That way you don't need an emissive. But just know that if you want to use this in Unreal Engine, like if you look at the previous Unreal Engine tutorial that I made to bring it in your textures and stuff, this wouldn't actually give off light in Unreal Engine 5. You would need an emissive mask. Because if you did use this as your emissive mask, then your stone would also give off color. And obviously we don't want that. So I'm going to disable this because I don't like that being in my base color, because base color is just for base color. And then there we go, our window. And then like I said, if you change this emissive color here, it should be called emissive/window because it's shared. But you can change this and do whatever kind of window color you want. Maybe something for Halloween, go with the orangey look. But anyways, hope you guys, orange is this way. Hope you guys learned something new. Let me know what you guys thought, and I'll see you guys in the next one for roughness. Now roughness is super simple. But anyways, see you guys and girls.